So, first of all, I think a lot of people in the community have heard about a lot of issues that are happening with the Commissioner of State Education, Betty Rosa, that she's attacked the yeshivos, that she's wanting equivalency in terms of the curriculum, and she's making certain demands in the curriculum that are not demands that are placed on public school students. The other part of the story is what Betty Rosa has done to special education. So let's go back to December of 2021, 1 month before Bill de Blasio was out of office as mayor. Uh, Betty Rosa, Bill de Blasio, meaning state ed, and the city and the DOE got together and in the backroom deal signed an illegal contract. That contract transferred effective immediately, set in place a transfer of all impartial hearings in New York City to something called OATH, which is Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. If you don't know what OATH is, if you've ever gotten a garbage ticket, it's from OATH. You have to go to OATH to adjudicate the garbage ticket. OATH is a city agency. OATH administrators are hired and fired by the mayor of New York City. So basically, the mayor is controlling OATH, and the OATH administrator can hire and fire judges at OATH. Basically, what they in effect try to do is, right now, up until now, New York City is always, just like the rest of the entire country, had impartial hearing officers adjudicating hearings against the Department of Education. When parents have grievances against the Department of Education, they have to bring their case to a hearing if they can't resolve the matter with the Department of Ed. And what happens is the parents have to go before an impartial hearing officer who's fair and impartial, who understands the law, and can make a decision. And this person is not somebody who can be an employee of the city or the state. They are not someone who should have any conflicts of interest that would conflict with their impartiality. We have about 150 of them. They work per diem, meaning they're contracted employees. They are not direct employees. So if the state or the city does not like how they rule, they can't do anything about it. The only way a hearing officer can be removed up until now is if they do something really egregious, then they can actually be dismissed by state ed, but it would have to be pretty egregious. In the meantime, the systems work pretty well up until now, where we feel that the judges are very neutral and that they don't have conflicts of interest because they are not direct employees. The December 1st agreement changes that. It effectively phases out these 150 per diem independent judges and replaces them with up to 50 government employed judges who work for OATH. These judges will be hired and fired by the OATH administrator. These judges will be supervised by the OATH administrator, and the OATH administrator is hired and fired by the mayor. Right after this contract was signed, and like I said, it was a backdoor deal, no public comment, no hearings, no discussion about this, even though it is a major, major shift in policy. And New York City will be the only city, and for that matter, the only state that would ever do this, and in the entire country. The rest of New York State, children in New York State actually are entitled to fair, impartial hearings with a neutral, impartial hearing officer, but the city children are not. It's a travesty. Nobody has said anything about it. It's been really silent. The media has not been covering this issue. And what happened is, after this December 1st agreement was signed, basically, when word got out, there were two lawsuits. One from the Parents' Council. We filed a lawsuit in federal court. There was another filed by the hearing officers in state court. They were trying to seek an automatic injunction. It was not given to them to stop the process. However, I actually got involved in trying to pass a bill. We proposed a bill, actually got Simcha Eichenstein, who's an assemblyman, to propose the bill. And we have 20 co-sponsors on this bill now. It's A9287. We also got a counterpart in the state Senate, and we have 6 co-sponsors on the Senate bill. And what we've been trying to do is to get the bill passed, because the bill basically states very eloquently, very simply, that a judge in a Board of Ed dispute must be an impartial hearing officer. They cannot have conflicts of interest, and they cannot be an employee of the city or the state. And that would maintain the integrity of our children's impartial hearings, which is vital. There was over 16,000 impartial hearings requested in New York City this past year. The DOE has started to phase in the OATH hearing officers, and it's been an absolute disaster. They are not adjudicating the hearings fairly. They are not educated. These
Are they
brand new.
denying cases also? Is that the problem?
They're
People are
dismissing
just
cases, they're denying cases, they're not issuing transcripts. They're taking a very, very long, time to appoint these hearing officers, and the old hearing officers are still here right now for the time being. However, the plan is that the city wants to phase them out. And in fact, we did not know what Mayor Adams' position was on this issue up until recently. But basically, Mayor Adams has asked the Assembly and the Senate to give him powers of control over the DOE for another 2 years, and they approved it. And just as they approved it, he then goes and issues an executive order, basically copying de Blasio's executive order back in December, where de Blasio, when people filed lawsuits saying it's against the law to move these hearings to oath, he files an executive order changing the law in New York City. Now Adams dovetailed onto de Blasio's executive order, said everything de Blasio said I'm bringing forward in my executive order, plus I'm adding additional powers to these judges. So we see that Mayor Adams is completely complicit in this whole situation, and what's been done is a travesty, and our children are not getting their fair day in court. And if you think that the parents in New York City are overly litigious, because New York City children with disabilities, students with disabilities filed more than 16,000 hearings this past year, whereas the entire rest of New York State combined, less than 300 hearings. But the parents are not overly litigious. The reason parents bring hearings are for simple issues. A lot of them are issues like getting your child on a school bus, transportation, making sure that your child gets their mandated services. Let's say your child's supposed to be getting tutoring or speech or some sort of therapy, OT, PT, counseling, and the DOE is not giving it to them. Parents have to have a way of obtaining these services. Otherwise, the children just go out without the services, and then there are children who don't have placements, don't have IEPs, and those children are struggling. And a lot of these hearings have to be brought year after year. So until we fix the systemic problem of why we have these hearings and what's wrong with the system, which will take years to fix, we still have to make sure that when these families go to an impartial hearing, that the judge is actually somebody who is completely neutral and impartial. That is so essential. That neutral decision maker. These parents are very, very overwhelmed as it is, and a lot of the families in New York City are low income. A lot of the families are immigrants. They don't have the money to go to lengthy appeals and to go to higher courts. So what they're doing.
Weren't we? I don't mean to cut you
I'm
off, but
sorry.
weren't we promised a few years ago by a press conference in City Hall by Mayor de Blasio? A lot of community leaders and Jewish organizations up there are praising Mayor de Blasio for saying that we're not going to have to fight anymore for these things. So that was all a lie?
Mayor de Blasio had tried an approach in 2014, but unfortunately the problem was that he never discussed it with people like me who actually do hearings, who could kind of find out what was good about the plan, what was not good about the plan. And basically it fell apart because they never staffed the Office of Legal Services properly to do all these settlements. And settlements began taking a long time, and sometimes it could take 2 or 3 years to settle a case.
But they were promised that once something is settled, they don't have to negotiate every year and go to court again and again and again and again.
That was never accurate.
So it is all a lie then.
I don't think the intention was to lie. I think.
They had a whole emergency press conference.
Yeah, no, I was part of the trainings that they did they called all the advocates and attorneys in who represent parents, and they told us, this is the way we're going to do things from now on. But the problem is they were putting cases into settlement, but it was taking them a while to do so, and then to negotiate the settlements could take years. Then they came out a couple of years ago with a 3-year stipulation of settlement, but they never honored them. I've had cases where we settled the case and it looked like we settled it for 3 years. We have a document saying that, but they didn't honor years 2 and 3, so I had to start all over again anyway. So it was kind of useless.
Maybe the approach should be suing the city and taking this federally?
So there is a federal lawsuit, but unfortunately it's an uphill battle really, because what was done, it was not just the city, it's the state ed, Betty Rosa, the same person who is attacking the yeshivos, is attacking the special education system. And she's also misrepresenting the situation to the elected officials. So, for example, I've spoken to Senator Lieu, who's the chair of education in the city. I've also spoken to Assemblyman Benedetto, And they were told things like, oh, since the transfer to oath, everything's been much better. And this is not accurate. The data is not there to support it. And when I actually requested the data from the state, how many hearings are waiting for hearing officers to be appointed, etc., they told me I have to foil that request, which I said that's kind of strange because you have that information. Why should somebody have to foil it? This should be available to the public readily. It doesn't make sense. So they're really hiding a lot of things. A lot of it's optics. They're trying to say oath is being so beneficial. We haven't seen any benefits from oath, and everyone's complaining from the parent side to the district side because it doesn't make sense. Why would you take out 150 experienced hearing officers, some of whom have been around for decades? They know the law like the back of their hands. These people care about the children, and replace them with the 30 to 50 government employees. That's basically what they did.
And where's the governor on this?
We don't know. We're not sure. She has not come out for it or against it. We are really hoping that in January, when the session starts again, that we can get this bill onto the agenda. And we're hoping that
The bill is ready to go, though. It just has to
the
now
bill
be
is
brought
ready
to the
to
floor.
go. We have a lot of support on the bill. The problem that we had was that Assemblyman Benedetto was not bringing the bill to a vote in his committee because of things that Commissioner Betty Rosa was telling him about oath. So he did not favor the bill at that
And
point.
Betty Rosa answers to the mayor. You're saying, right?
No, Betty
No,
Rosa is the Commissioner of State Ed.
So who does she answer to? The governor.
She would answer to the governor
So then-
and to the regents.
So the governor is obviously against yeshivas. Then she could say she's for it.
I'm
The fact that she's not taking a stance over here.
I'm not sure what the governor's position on the yeshivas are, and I'm not sure what the governor's position on this is. And I'm hoping that once the governor has adequate information about this situation, that eventually she would sign off on the bill, because the bill protects the interests of children with disabilities in New York City. It's very, very important. Like I said, New York City would be the only place in the entire country that does not have impartial hearing officers for these type of hearings, and it would be a travesty. But besides which, the logic of it, there's no logic. Why would you get rid of 150 licensed certified hearing officers who have been hearing cases for years, who are extremely experienced and knowledgeable in the law, and are completely impartial, and replace them with 30 to 50 government workers who get a 3-day training, don't have to take a test, unlike their predecessor hearing officers, and they work 9 to 5.
So
if
what
that.
is the
You're not going to get efficiency out of the, like for example, I was talking to Assemblyman Benedetto. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago. It was right after the July 4th weekend, and I said, you know what? I guarantee you that most of the per diem hearing officers worked at some point during the July 4th weekend. And if you replace these people with government workers, you're not going to get the same level of work. Besides the impartiality question, the numbers are just not there. I said to him, when the 16,000 hearings hit in September, which they will, there will be at least 16,000 hearings filed next year, because the issues that cause these hearings to take place have not been resolved. So New York City will be an ever-growing source of hearings. But the problem is that the numbers don't add up, and their hearing officers are not going to be capable of hearing these cases unless they treat them like garbage tickets. And we do not want our children's cases treated like sanitation tickets.
Are any yeshivas closing up because of this?
Well, that's a whole different issue. There's a history with the DOE. Even after parents settle or win a case, oftentimes the DOE doesn't pay the schools for years. There's one school I was working with at the beginning of this year was owed over $5 million in winning orders. And it's because the DOE has an implementation unit of about 6 people to implement tens of thousands of orders. And they're just not getting to these orders. They're not processing them. It's completely inefficient.
Well, that was another thing
people are
Mayor de
not surviving.
Blasio announced years ago at that press conference. They'll get the money. As soon as they win, they will have the money.
It never happened. And
So again, I call it a lie. I don't know. You could call it something else.
I mean,
It's
I
you
don't-
get up there as a press conference,
Right. I just don't think that he went into this with the proper background on the issue. I don't know if he intended to lie, but in the end, the whole program fell apart and kind of backfired. So
Naftali Moster have anything to do with this also? Pushing this agenda, attacking the yeshivas? Because
Well,
this is
Naftali-
what it sounds like, an
Naftali
attack on the
Moster,
yeshivas.
someone told me that he's not there anymore, but I'm not sure. about that.
That's what was written.
That's
I
what I
don't
was
know.
told. But in any event, I remember a few years ago, before the pandemic, a truck pulled up in front of the hearing office on Livingston Street where I was doing my hearings, and it was a picture of a Hasidic child, a full-blown poster on this poster truck, and it was an ad for Naftali Moster's organization and Yafed, and it was extremely offensive. And as an advocate and as a parent, was very offended to see this poster, and I felt it discriminated against our Jewish children, and I felt that it like spotlighted them in a very negative way, and I really, disagree with their methods. Yeah, everyone wants schools to improve to the best possible way, but the Yafed is a completely different agenda here, and it's not on improving yeshivas. People have choices where they want to enroll their children. If they don't think their child's yeshiva is giving their children a good education, it's a free country. You could put your children in a different school. Nobody's
On
coming
top of that, if
yeah.
educators are not getting paid, like what you're saying, for years, even after they win, how do they say, people are not trying to educate when they're not getting paid to educate?
Right. Well,
It's like a
but you know what?
contradiction
It's
right
an
there.
amazing thing. A lot of these special ed schools that I work with are so devoted to the children that they will take out loans, interest-bearing loans, just to pay their staff so that they can make ends meet. And yes, over the years, some wonderful schools have closed as a result of lack of payments, not getting paid on time. And again, this is from winning orders and settlements where they're fully entitled to get compensation and they should be paid right away. In fact, I actually think that if our elected officials want to help the parents in a big way, in a meaningful way, I think the next step would be really to introduce a new law, a bill that says that any settlement or winning order from a hearing officer must be paid within 30 days or it starts to accrue interest. If they would pass that, I think that would eliminate the entire problem, because then the DOE would see that they have to pay. But there's some schools and some individuals, therapists and providers who have not been paid for 2 or 3 years. How can you ask somebody to be a paraprofessional one-to-one with a child, and they work day in, day out, every day, all day long in school, helping children who are autistic, children who have hyperactivity, ADHD, children who need to be taken to the bathroom, need physical assistance, and you're expecting this person to pay their bills and put food on their table in their own home but not pay them for the entire year. It's totally not acceptable. It's a problem. It's something in the system that has to fix, but I can't understand the logic in going after the one thing in the system that was working, which was we had 150 neutral, fair judges. So that,
And even then, it still was not perfect. People have to wait years.
the system's not perfect, but that system wasn't the judge's fault. That was the infrastructure that the DOE had, meaning if they have 6 people implementing 16,000 orders, that's not enough people. They have a legal department, OLS, Office of Legal Services, where it's a revolving door. You have attorneys come in and then they're gone that year. So when you're negotiating a settlement and you have to negotiate with 3 or 4 or more people over the course of a year or 2 years and things keep getting delayed, they don't have any accountability for any of this.
Now, what happens if the feds get involved? Because you said there's a federal lawsuit, right?
There is.
And if the federal government decides to be on your side and, they pass judgment in your favor and the city still doesn't listen, then what happens?
Well, I think if the parents won the federal lawsuit, then the city would have to listen. But I think that the feds, in terms of OSEP, Office of Special Education Programs, I think it's called, I think if they would get involved and they would tell the city, you can't do this, it's completely illegal.
But they're already breaking the law, but the city's breaking the law right now. So I'm saying, really what my question is, what makes you think they'll listen to the federal government? They're not listening to laws that were passed and judgments in the last few years.
At least it will empower us to be able to somehow overturn what they're doing, I think. Mm-hmm. That's why I was trying to pass a law. I mean, I know that that one method was going in the direction of judicial. I went legislative because I think that if we would pass a bill that says that the judges have to be neutral and can't be city employees or employees of a state agency, that would help. I'm looking for solutions to help here. It is a very overwhelmed system. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed.